I saw a video on TikTok this weekend that was a guy basically complaining that the New York Yankees have an unfair advantage because their outfield wall, especially on the right side, is shorter, and so it's easier for them to hit home runs.
Short
And there was
porch.
just a bunch of people in the comments being like, "You do know that the other team gets to play on in the same ballpark when they play the Yankees, right?" Which was hilarious, but it got me thinking. So, like, each ballpark is unique. There are unique home field advantages in Major League Baseball. What would be like the applicable home field advantage that we could institute in college football? Like, what's a thing that we could do? Like, would you want
Yeah.
to see people change like goalposts, like
No,
varying widths? Like, what would be the comparable advantage?
if you really want to shake things up, you could have like a Mike Leach team, for example, at Mississippi State, just make the field as wide as possible. Because the reason that those offenses work is there's just too much space, right?
Yeah,
Whereas like if you played Army, like you're playing on a tennis court at Army,
yeah,
right? Like like
yeah.
you could, I think the width of the field is the thing that would have the biggest impact. That's not the most fun, right? Like that's a boring answer. The
Right.
the field goal post would be fun. Alabama having a bigger field goal post might help them out a little bit. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I mean, like, like other teams, like Boise State changed the turf color,
Yeah.
and then tried to wear blue on blue for like an
Yeah.
advantage.
The
That seems
Astros,
easy.
the Astros field used to have a hill in dead center, like a literal hill. Wonder if you could you put a hill at the 50-yard line?
Just put a speed bump at the 20.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if that helps, right? Like,
Because your guys would run into it too, which
yeah,
would be a
well,
problem.
maybe that helps a team like, Oklahoma and like the Mike Stoops era when they would just keep giving up, fly routes to Baylor.
Yeah.
Maybe the speed bump, causes some issues for those receivers a little bit. But yeah, no, I mean, if you've got a speed bump at the red zone, you don't want to be the defensive back running backwards, right?
I like the idea of just widening the field. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, or narrowing it. Yeah,
Or
depending on what
narrowing
offense
it.
you want to run. Yeah,
I like
just
that idea.
yeah.
It'd make playing Mike Leach teams even more unenviable.
Would he be better? He wouldn't be better than Nick Saban
Would
necessarily.
would Leach win a national championship with a wider field?
I
We
think
covered that on First Take next.
Do you want to form an alliance with me?
Absolutely, I do.
Welcome back into the Alliance. I'm Spenser Davis with Saturday Road. That's Derek Peterson with Saturday Out West. We talk about the ACC, the Pac-12, and college football at large. And Derek, today we're going to go a little bit general here. We're talking about spring games. It's spring. It's definitely spring game season. There were a ton this past week for both of our conferences, and plenty more coming over the coming weeks here in April and even into early May. And I somebody told me that you have an opinion about spring games and about how they're run and just the inconsistency of them. And I would like to hear your solution to fix the spring game.
Yeah, it's not really a solution to fix the spring game. It's more just like a complaint about the way coaches view spring games.
Oh, okay.
And I guess this is how we're going to rope in the Big Ten. We're contractually obligated to talk about the Big Ten once in a while on this video. So I think this is how we're going to do it, because I was reading about Nebraska's spring game, and I covered Nebraska.
Legendary spring game over there in Nebraska.
I covered
great job.
Spring is the time where they win national championships out there, and then they get to the regular season and they win 3 games. So I covered them for a few years, so I kind of know the way Frost wants to operate with the spring game, and it was more of the same this year. They've got basically an entire new offense. They've got a new offensive coordinator. They've got a new quarterback. It remains to be seen how different things are going to be because Frost is still in charge and he's an offensive guy, but they just don't show anything. And Frost treats the spring game as basically, I want to do it. I want butts in seats in the stands so that we can have a nice recruiting atmosphere. And I want to get out healthy, but I don't really care about it. And I don't really care to show you anything. Casey Thompson, who is presumably going to be their starting quarterback, was on the field for like 3 series and then was off the field. And you just kind of go around the country and look at the way various teams operate and treat their spring games. And there's just so much inconsistency. Maybe that's not the right word to use because everybody can operate differently.
I mean, there's different formats.
Well, so I watched Nebraska and then I switched over to Arizona so I could, watch the Arizona spring game for my sites purposes. And they were tackling and they were hitting. And the guys that are expected to compete for the starting quarterback job were on the field most of the game.
Yeah.
And they were showing some stuff. And of course, they're not going to show gadget plays that they have in the book or things that are, newly inserted for this upcoming season, but they played a football game. And I wonder if you're going to put your guys on the field, because players can get hurt just stretching. Players can get hurt going through positional drills. Like players can get hurt practicing football. If you're going to put them on a field, put them in pads, play a game, try to simulate what's going to happen on a Saturday as close as possible. And if you don't want to do that, then just don't televise a 15th practice, because that's what it essentially amounts to at some places. It's just a 15th practice. Yeah. And we make a big deal out of it. And it ends up being, a big, you get a ton of those columns from media people. Like, we didn't learn much, but we weren't supposed to learn much. Okay. Well, then why do I care about this thing?
Yeah. I thought Clemson did a pretty good job with their spring game. 4 quarters, it's the rules of football. You couldn't hit the quarterback, but they were tackling other than that. And Dabo Swinney was on the call, the whole broadcast. It was great. But then you look at like Florida State, for example, they started their spring game with a drill, basically, with them drilling red zone stuff.
Yeah.
And Jordan Travis, Tate Rodemaker, and AJ Duffy, they're top 3 quarterbacks. And it's not a competition. Like, Jordan Travis is going to be the starter, but their top 3 quarterbacks all threw an interception on a 2-point conversion to open the spring game, which is just not where you want to be, right? I mean, it's very much not ideal. I mean, Florida State should probably not go for 2 a single time this season. If they do, they should probably run it, right? But yeah, I mean, these spring games, they're so inconsistent. Like, North Carolina didn't have a clock for their spring game, which I thought was interesting. The one downside,
how long did it go? Like, what was the structure?
They were on like the ACC network broadcast interface. There was just like play 1, play 2, play 3, and they had quarters. So I don't remember exactly when they switched over, if it was 20 plays or 15 or 25, whatever. At some play mark, they switched over to the next quarter, and then they were done.
Maybe you know this, maybe you don't. Did like Clemson, North Carolina tickets for the game? Was it free admission? Was it like $10? Like, what was the ticket situation?
I don't know, and I will say that neither of those spring games were particularly well attended.
Okay.
So I'm not sure that it doesn't, like some programs like Nebraska and even like Oklahoma and Alabama, like they want fans out at the spring game. They want
it's a recruiting event. Yeah.
They want minimum half and ideally the stadium to be full. Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, Clemson just North Carolina probably couldn't even if they wanted to. Clemson probably could if they really pushed, but they clearly didn't because it was a pretty sparse crowd for, considering the stature of Clemson's program. But
Nebraska's been charging to get into the spring game. No, it's not absurd. I think it's like $10.
Yeah.
And kids get in free, I think. But like, if you're going to charge me money to come watch this thing, it better not be a practice. That's where I'm at. Like, it better not be a practice. It needs to be as close to a game simulation as you can give me. If you're going to charge me money, if it's going to be free attendance, you know what? Or free admission, do whatever you want. If you're going to charge me money, I want to see dudes tackling each other. I want to see you actually trying to get better on the field, because more often than not, this gets viewed like a throwaway thing where, coaches are like, well, we've got 14 data points prior to this. That means more to us than just this one practice. And it's a throwaway. And if we're going to make a big deal out of it, it needs to not be a throwaway.
How do they if college football had like a commissioner or like a czar of some sort, like how do you fix this? Like, do you just say, all right, everybody's spring game has to look exactly like this? Or do you just keep letting everybody do, free reign and you do what you do?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's a necessarily like quote unquote problem that needs to be fixed. Like, this is me being old man yelling at a cloud. sort of situation.
But it would be nice if like it wasn't this way.
It would be cool. So here's the thing that I floated on my podcast when I was talking to Nebraska people. What if, like college basketball used the NIT a few years ago to experiment with rule changes. They used it, as like this like buffer zone to see if these were actually things that they wanted to do. What if you just used spring games and everybody had to have a simulated game? Now you could have tag off, you could have thud, you could have tackling to the ground. That can be your choice, but it's got to be a simulated game. It can't be you're doing, red zone drills to open and a little bit of 11 on 11 and some 7-on-7 work. It's got to be a simulated game, but you can change stuff up. Maybe you can expand the width of the field goal post. Now, nobody's going to do that because then you'd have to get a new field goal post for just one game a year, which would be stupid. But maybe you expand the width of the field by a few yards.
Treat it like minor league baseball.
Maybe you get a little weird. Maybe you can experiment with some rules. Experiment with some different rules or some different kind of tweaks to the game to see if there's some stuff that maybe we should implement. Like me, for instance, I hate kicking. Don't kick. No punting, no kicking, no kickoffs. I don't want to see it. Just play football. Just line up at the 20 and go. And when you score a touchdown, go. You have a 2-point conversion to see if you can get the ball back.
It would be fun. Oh, you like make it take it?
Yeah.
That'd be a fun wrinkle. Why not? Yeah. I think it'd be fun if like Clemson, for example, played like a regional G5 opponent for their spring game instead of like scrimmaging against each other. Or like, could Nebraska play like, UNO? Is that a thing? They have a
maybe, but then you'd have to pay to get that team there. And like, I mean, if you're only charging $10 for a spring game, you're not going to get it. Iowa State has go ahead.
I mean, I don't know. Would you have to pay, it wouldn't be as much as like an actual game. Like,
sure. Well, I mean, but you're paying to play that. I mean, that you're wanting that team to come give you a benefit. Like Iowa State is doing 2. They did 2, I believe, at 2 different high schools, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, make it interesting. Make it worth my money, Spencer. If you're going to ask me for my money, make it worth it.
Or your time. If you're going to be watching Arizona spring game on the Pac-12 network.
I did enjoy Arizona spring game.
Are you going to enjoy Arizona State spring game?
Theirs was the practice type. Theirs was, you got a little bit of 11 on 11, a little bit of 7-on-7. Stanford's was over in an hour. Like I watched Arizona's and then switched over, and then Stanford's was just done and it started an hour later. And I was like, all right, well, okay, cool. Arizona's was fun. USC's is going to be on ESPN. Kirk Herbstreit is going to be there. Watch Lincoln Riley just not throw anybody out. Like you're going to get the walk-on quarterback starting, and you're not going to get to see Caleb Williams.
Are we? By the way, I just kind of perused some headlines. Is Lincoln Riley having a quarterback competition? Is that like a thing? I know, but like, is that a thing that he's trying to like prop up?
It's a thing that he's tried to do his entire time as a head coach.
That's what I was getting at. Yeah. Except for ironically, the only time at Oklahoma he didn't have a quarterback competition was when Caleb Williams ends up overtaking Spencer Rattler.
I don't think that that's unique to Lincoln Riley, though. That seems to be the way.
Unique.
Well, but that seems to be the way that a lot of coaches are veering as we get into this portal thing. You want to have for-show competitions. Like I can look around at the Pac-12 and see a lot of teams that are doing similar stuff. Where they're like, we're not going to name a starter until a couple of weeks before the season.
I understand, but he made Kyler Murray compete with Austin Kendall. And
but was it competing though? Was it competing though, or was it just he was telling the media that it was a competition? Like,
well,
if Lincoln Riley goes to Kyler Murray in private in a meeting after practice and says, "Yeah, you're our guy, don't worry about it," and then goes to Ryan Aber or Barry Trammell, I know people don't know who that is, and I love Ryan, goes to Barry Trammell and says, "We got a quarterback competition, Barry. Do you think Kyler's going to care about that?"
No, it's not. It's not about Kyler. I mean, it's just about the. I don't know. Like at some point, if you're claiming that Austin Kendall and Kyler Murray are in a quarterback competition, then why should we take you seriously about anything that you say, right? And it's the same thing with Caleb Williams and whoever the kid that Caleb Williams is going to beat here in a few weeks. Like
Miller Moss. Here's what here to tie us back. We shouldn't care about anything coaches say. There's so much paranoia in college coaching They tell us half truths and lies like 75% of the time. Like to parse what a coach actually believes or true thoughts, it's like 20% of what they say. Or they just take the route where they just don't say anything and give
Awesome.
you,
Yeah.
like 15 word answers. They just don't say anything. So like this is part of the spring game thing is there's just a lot of paranoia in college coaching.
Yeah,
And coaches think that, if you run a gadget play in a spring game, that all of a sudden Pat Fitzgerald later down the line is going to be combing through your spring game tape with a fine tooth comb and being like, oh, they're running this. We got to be prepared for this. This is the game plan right here.
I would actually run if I was. Let's pretend that we're on a college football staff. I would run only trick plays in the spring game. Just put as much garbage on tape as possible and just overwhelm the teams that are going to be preparing for it.
No, here's what I would do. Yeah, I like that idea. First of all, I don't want to discredit. I don't want to like dismiss it. Here's what I would do. I would have my game plan for week 1 ready to go for the spring game. And my spring game like script is going to be my week 1 game plan. Because that there's not a single coach in America that's going to look at your spring game tape and be like, all right, well, this is what they're running. So this is what we're going to prepare for. They're all going to be like, throw away. We're not watching it.
Maybe twice, right? Once, maybe twice before everyone catches on, right?
You know who would do that? Mike Leach.
Mike Leach only has a few plays anyway. So
yeah, so it wouldn't take him much time. Like he doesn't need a ton of time to craft a week 1 game plan.
Oh my gosh.
Takes him 5 minutes.
All right, guys, I think that's going to do it for this week. We talked for a while there about spring games and other just college football coaching mentality. And we're going to keep doing that over the course of the spring. Eventually, we'll start to get into some team previews over the summer. But, spring football, we're in full swing. We'll be back next week. Thanks for hanging with us.